I would say that my radar, as far as my ability to see persuasive tactics, is hypersensitive. Absolutely. My name is DianeBenscoter, and I'm from Nebraska originally, but I live in Portland, Oregon right now. And I just founded a nonprofit organization that helps give support and services to people who are leaving extremist groups like religious cults and gangs and hate groups and such. My background in this work started when I was pretty young. I joined a religious cult when I was 17. You may know it as the Moonies. And I was involved in that group for 5 years. And then my family had me deprogrammed. And then I became a deprogrammer, which was something that was going on back in the 70s or 80s, early 80s. And families were desperate and trying to find a solution to help their loved ones leave these kind of situations. And so in the course of one of those cases where the family was holding the person that they were concerned about in a room and not letting them leave, things went wrong and the person went out a window, and I was eventually arrested for kidnapping. And so I, with a plea bargain, did not do any time, but I quit doing that work like that. And I eventually wrote a book and gave a TED Talk, and since then have realized that I wanted to create real workable solutions that could actually make an impact in the world in this area. And so I founded this nonprofit to do that. The reason I think that joining this group was compelling to me was that I was kind of lost in my world. The Vietnam War was going on, and I wanted to do something about it. There's a lot of music in that era that spoke about the gap between a lot of young people who wanted to end the war and who were trying to find ways to do that and trying to kind of make a new world. And I was idealistic. I was, remember, 17, so I was really young. And so I went on this walk for world peace. And someone actually handed me a banana, and it had a little flyer around it, and I ended up going. And in the course of that walk from Omaha, Nebraska to Des Moines, Iowa, which is 150 miles, and took us days to get there, and we stayed in like churches and such along the way. They lectured in the evenings, and every day while we were walking, they talked to us about how they were going to make a difference in the world. And then eventually I found out that this kind of secret, or that I had been specially prepared by God to hear, was that the Messiah was on the earth, and that I had been chosen to be a disciple. So that was a really big upgrade in my life, to go from being a lost young person, not knowing what to do, to a disciple of Christ. So I went wholeheartedly into it, really believing that, and so for 5 years I did believe the doctrine, and it was very intense lifestyle, and I was 100% dedicated to that cause. The way that this organization grew, and the way that it recruited new members and became really pretty powerful for a while, was it used techniques that I now would refer to as psychological manipulation. And they intentionally set out to find people who were vulnerable to the techniques that they were using. And so they would seek people out like myself who felt lost or felt like their life didn't have much meaning, so what they were selling was a dream. And that's not unlike many products and many services. What you're selling is not a product or service, but a dream of a happier life or a better world. And so I really bought into that. But what's different about an organization like this is that there's intentional things built into the milieu, into the organization, into the environment that are meant to create an us and a them, and to make you feel like this is your new family, and that everyone else doesn't really understand, and that one day everyone will understand, but you feel really righteous in your belief system, and you really feel like you've found something that's so special and so important that you should dedicate your life to it, and you should never let anything persuade you, and that if anything is trying to persuade you, that's the evil in the world. That's Satan. That's whatever word is used for that. So as far as getting new members, we were always looking, and the idea was that if we find these people, it's really better for them. It's better for all their descendants, and all of their ancestors will be celebrating forevermore, that we were able to get this person to serve God in this way. So it was a very compelling argument that they made. Like in anything, you have to know your target audience. And so not everybody is going to fall prey to this kind of persuasion. And so you have to intentionally, if your goal is to build this kind of an organization, you have to look for the kind of people who are susceptible to this kind of rhetoric, to this kind of persuasion. And so what you're looking for is someone who is searching for meaning, someone who is lost in their world, someone who, and that's just my group, but in any of these kind of groups, it could be different things. Like maybe if it's a hate group, they maybe feel like they're not getting a fair shake in the world, and then you can persuade them that being part of the Aryan nation is your right, and that the problem is people of color, that they're the ones that are, that are causing you problems in your world. You should be proud to be white, and so these arguments feed to a specific kind of need a person has. So if a person, but it almost always has something to do with a psychological or an emotional need that a person has, and then you can offer them a solution to that. And often it is community, or a sense of family, a sense of meaning in your life, to work for something bigger than yourself. Those are, I think, human needs that are being filled by these kinds of organizations.
Yeah.
When I think about what it was that caused me to reconsider what was going on, or actually have kind of a profound moment in my life when I came to realize that this whole thing was kind of a lie. My family had hired someone to come and talk to me. They were called deprogrammers. I don't really care for that word that much anymore because it's lost its meaning. But basically they started talking to me. What worked for me was they started talking with me about thought reform and how mind control works. And there was a book that was written by a man named Robert Lifton about Chinese prison camps, and he kind of defined what brainwashing is. And in it, there were if these 8 things are involved in an environment, and to the degree they are, and where that meets with a person's vulnerability, that's how much the effect will have their ability to be what he termed brainwashed. I would call it or thought reform, or mental manipulation. Your decision-making processes are controlled. And so as we went through those 8 things, it became so clear to me that every single one of them were definitely in the environment I was in. And I started to see that, in fact, it was possible that maybe I was being manipulated. And so that's why I think it's really important to shed light on these techniques, and to basically point out the snake oil and how manipulation works, so that people can make decisions based on a product or service, or getting involved in an organization or something is not because of of snake oil, not because of intentional manipulative, psychological manipulative techniques that are being used, but instead it has valid, credible value. And so, did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, you definitely did. Yeah, okay. No, that was great.
Let me add something to that, and also in reference to that moment that I came to realize that it was a lie. It was a very devastating moment, and I think that's important for anyone who is considering using manipulative tactics, even to sell a product or service, is that when someone realizes that they've been taken advantage of, it's really devastating for me, because I'd given 5 years of my life and my heart and soul, and I had broken relationships with my family, and the devastation was horrible. I actually heard glass breaking around me. I actually thought I heard glass breaking in that moment. It was like my world was crashing down around me. And so I think it's important to realize that in any situation where that kind of manipulation has happened, there comes a moment when you realize you've been had, that you've been taken advantage of. And it's a horrible moment, and it can turn into a lot of bitterness, especially toward those who use those techniques to take advantage of you.